Hi, welcome to Hillcrest Sermons, growing together.
Show us your heart's delight.
Good morning. Happy Easter. Delighted to have you here. I look around at the number of seats in this room. I think, good choice on having the kids start downstairs. That was wisdom, and cracking the windows, also a smart thing. Delighted to have you. If I haven't met you, my name is Christian Lindbeck. I'm the very grateful lead pastor of Hillcrest Church, part of a wonderful team, and it's our real joy to welcome you here on Easter morning. And think about this, all around the world, literally all around the world, today, billions of Christians, billions with a B, billions of Christians and millions of guests are gathered somewhere. And by somewhere, I mean in all kinds of places. They are gathered somewhere today celebrating the news that I would assert to you, and we have been singing about this morning, news that changes literally everything. The resurrection of Jesus Christ changes everything. Like your attitude buying groceries is changed by this news that changes the world. What is life about? What's it about? Like, what are we doing here? This bill paying, tax generating, TV watching. Sometimes you're like, you buy the food, you make the food, you eat the food, you clean up the food, right? What is this all about? Like, if it's just that is not a satisfactory answer to that question. What is this about? What is it we're doing here? How do we understand life? How do we enjoy life? I think people, even outside of the Christian faith, all the time, life is this great gift. And sometimes I want to say, yeah, prove it. Like, how so? How do we enjoy this extraordinary gift of being alive? I look out there and I still see families and some kids and roommates and friends of all sorts. How do we make sense of this thing that we are all doing together? Well, about not quite yet 2,000 years ago, this man in Galilee, who was the fulfillment, a long-awaited fulfillment, millennia of hope, started teaching and declaring that he had answers to some of those deepest questions. And as we know, some people believed him, some people struggled with his words, and some people hated him and sought to kill him for what he had to say. And Jesus had much to commend him believable. The wisdom of his teaching, the way, the working of his miracles, much that you might say, hey, I can believe what this guy is saying. But he ends that season of teaching with this capstone event that we celebrate today, which has earned him the right to say the things that I said were true are true. And you may know they're true because I was publicly killed and publicly raised from the dead. And once you pull that off on your own, then you're able to say the other stuff that I said to you, also true. So this was his capstone event. And he was resurrected, he says, as the firstborn of the new and final human reality. That he was going to make millions and billions of siblings of the same sort of humanity. He said, I have gone through death into life, and now I offer you also that gift of abundant and enduring life, the gift of the love of God through his self-chosen sacrifice. And as I said, I think, we know that there are billions of believers around the world, billions of others, and many still working out. And this goes for believers as well. Believers and people who've only heard about this person. Can his promises really be believed? Can you believe what he has to say? Can his promise be believed? Can life have a beautiful purpose no matter our circumstance? I think, that's a that's a heavy thing to say because we come at it with a very certain perspective. But that has to be real everywhere in all kinds of contexts and all sorts of suffering. Do our individual lives matter? Are we actually individually and corporately loved by this vast and incredible being? And can we find like deep, enduring, like lasting, actual, in the day, in the moment, lasting satisfaction in our existence, whatever our circumstances are? Does that exist for us? And I hope that we can be honest about our feelings of satisfaction. As we celebrate, one of the things that's really important for us as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, that it doesn't just become songs and nice ideas, but it has to be like functional, living truth for us. And I find, at least as I look around and I check my own heart, that deep satisfaction feels like it is an increasingly short supply. Especially in kind of Western culture, all those places that exist, that like really deep, like I am, whatever my circumstances, even if they're problematic, I am deeply satisfied. I coming through problem or coming through, I feel like a deep satisfaction about even existing. Instead, I see around a lot dissatisfaction and disappointment. Like, this is it? This is how this works out? Or this is what my life is? This is not what I had planned. This is not what I thought this would look like. Or disillusionment. Everything's broken. Everything sucks. Nothing works out. Disillusioned that things could possibly work out. Kind of dismay over the way we or others may behave. Anger. Emptiness. Nihilism. Like, nihilism to me feels like the predominant philosophy. This is the eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. Nothing matters. I don't matter. You don't matter. Nothing matters. We might as well have as much fun in this great big pool of chaos all the time that we can until it's, that's not satisfaction at all. That's frantic. That's frantic. Like, who knows? Tomorrow I get a diagnosis, turns the whole thing upside down. It doesn't matter anyhow. I always wonder for those who have like a kind of a functional nihilism, what makes them like go about, doing anything? Some of us have a screaming rage or a quiet depression. And I think that kind of screaming rage or quiet depression is crammed daily into our hearts and minds by the all-seeing eye of the tragedy-hungry media. Have you ever thought to yourself, it almost seems like somebody wants us to be despondent? And so I think it's a timely, honest, real, good Easter question. Is there actually enduring satisfaction in this broken world? Can enduring satisfaction be found in the life of this Jewish resurrected rabbi, word-confirmed Son of God? Is that an idea? Or is there some kind of lasting, enduring satisfaction that is really available in Jesus? I do think it's a timely question. I'd even ask you right now, maybe just take a pause right now. Do a little self-inventory. Just actually sit still for a second and ask yourself, am I deeply satisfied in the midst of my life? Not my imaginary life, but is there a deep satisfaction that at least I can touch? That doesn't mean there's not all kinds of craziness, but can I touch in the midst of that some sense of deep satisfaction? It's kind of a how are you doing question. Outside of this instant, how do you generally feel? Maybe you generally feel deeply satisfied. I would invite you to be curious this morning, and I'm not guessing at what it is. Just be curious about the enduring nature of that satisfaction. Of the deep satisfaction you have, does it have an enduring component to it? Could this satisfaction last if your job or your circumstance or your health or your friendship or your marriage didn't last? And maybe you do feel generally or occasionally worn out, stressed out, lonely, bored, guilty, or dissatisfied, unsatisfied. And I must tell you, notice this isn't like a hand-raising moment. Please, if you're deeply dissatisfied, would you raise your hand? Your spouse is like, what? You wouldn't be alone, though. You'd be in good company. In fact, all the way back in 1965, the Rolling Stones wrote a song that touches this common human dissatisfaction, the lyrics of which are so popular, you may be already singing them in your head right now. I can't get no satisfaction. I love this. I try, and I try, and I try, and I try, but still, I can't get no satisfaction. And I just wonder, is that the deal, or is Jesus right? Is that the deal with life? You just can't, there's just nothing about it? Or is Jesus right, that there is enduring, indestructible, and everlasting satisfaction? That's a great Easter question. The Hebrew Scriptures, sometimes we call them the Old Testament, but the Hebrew Scriptures paint a mouth-watering image of enduring satisfaction that is especially crafted for a water-scarce people. Now, maybe when you read about God's enduring satisfaction in the Old Testament and you live in Seattle, you think to yourself, rain is the last thing that I need. But if you live somewhere where you depended on the hand of God for water, it's the perfect image of God's enduring satisfaction. Throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, this image pops up. The waters will gush in the wilderness. When they think wilderness, don't think Baker. Think Eastern Washington. There's dry, empty wilderness. Rivers flowing on bare heights, impossible. The rivers flow beneath the bare heights. Water pouring constantly on a thirsty land. Water that is mysteriously sourced from underneath the threshold of the temple in Jerusalem. Something pours out of the temple in Jerusalem that goes to a thirsty land. Living water, moving, fresh, clean, living water that comes from Jerusalem, so that everyone who thirsts can find enduring satisfaction. The picture that we see over and over is this: water flows out into places where there is no life, and everywhere it goes, life abounds. All the places where there was no hope, life abounds when this river shows up. And one of the great descriptions of this in Ezekiel, there's this angel that's touring Ezekiel through a picture. Ezekiel's the author of this book. He's a prophet. And he's touring Ezekiel through one of these river images where it starts small and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and everywhere it goes, it brings life. And as he's touring Ezekiel through the picture, he asks him this pointy question at the end: do you see this? Do you see this can you believe it? Because Ezekiel is thinking right away, not possible. That's a sensible thing. Like the desert can't bloom with life. And here is this angel saying, there can be this picture of enduring satisfaction in this unlikely, even impossibly unlikely place. Do you see this? Can you believe it? And again, I think this wonderful image continues to ask us this question. Can we believe it? Do you see it? How can it be? How can it be? How will this picture of enduring satisfaction be fulfilled? How will God bring this to pass? And this morning, we already heard some of the words that were spoken by the resurrected King about how enduring satisfaction, like real life, would be brought to the world. And we heard the girls read part of it already in that portion of the story that comes out of John 4. Jesus takes kind of a circuitous route through a dry part of the land up to the hills in a place called Samaria, and at high noon on a hot day, he is sitting in front of a well of what would be stale or stored water. And this woman approaches him, who also shouldn't be there in the middle of the day, and he talks to her about a living water that enduringly satisfies. And at first she starts to think to herself, he must meet another source of water. Like, oh, he must know about another source of water that isn't this well of water that we have. And Jesus helps her understand that he intends to bring to her this long-awaited satisfaction. These the water flowing in the desert images that all the people of this region would have been raised in. That God would bring this enduring satisfaction to the land. And he begins to help her understand that he is this long-promised satisfaction of living water sourced from God that will satisfy her whole life. It's a wonderful story. We've talked about it recently. Jesus talks with the Samaritan woman. And like I said, you heard part of it already. When he approaches her at the well, she challenges him. How are you, a Jewish man, talking to me at this well about water? And Jesus answered her in verse 10. If you knew, and she will come to know, the gift of God, that is who Jesus is, and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Now, that is a very sage thing to say. You just have to admit at the moment, a profoundly confusing one. Right? Yeah, right? How many people do you think stood around Jesus and said, I don't exactly get what you were saying, right? And so this is an interesting question from him. Sir, the woman says, you have nothing to draw, and the well is deep. Where will you get living water? Are you greater than Jacob, who dug this well himself? Verse 13, Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty. It will meet one kind of physical need. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them springs of living water, welling up into eternal life. The woman said to him, Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. And he challenges her. He told her, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is that you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. Now, I just said, is there enduring satisfaction in all places? Jesus is getting ready to speak into the deepest wound of her life, the hardest part of her identity. Sir, the woman says, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Now watch Jesus again beginning to point to the larger image. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know, and we worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet, even so, a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth." The woman said to him, "I know the Messiah, who is called the Christ, is coming, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us." And as you heard said already, Jesus drops this bombshell. Then Jesus declared, "I, the one speaking to you, am he. I am the Messiah who is the fulfillment of this vision of satisfaction." It says just then, verse 27, just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman by himself. But no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then leaving her water jar, the woman dropped what she was doing, went back to town and said to the people, "Come see the man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" Verse 30, then they came out of town and made their way toward Jesus. Jesus begins to show this person, to unpack in her life, that the deepest answer to her most profound needs, he's not just meeting her need for a physical drink of water, but he is meeting, when you think about satisfaction, the deepest needs of her identity. Who is she? What is she doing? What is this life about? He meets her need for identity. He meets her need for forgiveness. He meets her need for acceptance, and he meets her need to be returned back into community. She dropped what she was doing. She ran back to town. The people came out to Jesus. Verse 39 of this passage says, "And many believed in Jesus because of the words of this woman." Jesus showing her, I am the answer, this deep satisfaction that you have in your life. Physical, emotional identity and belonging is met in me. Jesus is the living water that satisfies. God, who is the supremely good creator, is able to give us everything in need in abundance, says, "I make a fountain of living water that is the source of true satisfaction." I love this picture. This is an image of life-giving water from God. Here and in other places, here's the promise that is extended. When people find life through the gift in Jesus, part of that gift is living water, enduring satisfaction. The barren becomes fruitful. The dry becomes nourished. The empty becomes filled. The bitter becomes sweet. The dead is brought to life. In Luke 7, around this time when he's being challenged by his cousin John and his followers who had been the Baptists about what's happening in this season, Jesus answers in verse 29. It says, "At that time, that very time, Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. And so he replied to these messengers from John, 'Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor.'" The year of God's salvation, the promise of enduring satisfaction is proclaimed to all people. The unhealthy is healed, the dead made alive. Jesus says here in verse 14 of this passage that we just read, and then again in Luke 7, he says, here's what happens. "I am the gift of living and enduring water for each of you, and when you receive the gift of living water from me," I love that he says, "it becomes a fount of living water in you." When you can experience, take in, and live with an enduring satisfaction in your own life, here's the best news. it becomes a gift to those around you. Do you know what is not a gift to people around us? Grumbling and dissatisfied life. Are there seasons of grumbling and dissatisfaction? Yes. Is this about a fundamental reality of a promise that there is available an enduring, touchable satisfaction that comes through Jesus? This is the hope that living waters become a spring of satisfied life. This is how the image is fulfilled that we saw in Ezekiel and other places in the Hebrew Scriptures. How does living water reach the whole earth? How does something that starts in Jerusalem turn into a river of living water that touches the whole earth? How does it reach Whatcom County so that it meets a Japanese student so that we're baptizing people here on a Sunday morning? It reaches it through the heart and life and overflowing living water of the people who follow Jesus. The image of a river of living water is us. Wherever the river goes, life abounds. The picture is we become the fount of living water. Having drunk satisfaction from Jesus, we become living water to the world around us. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture of how this promise in the Hebrew Scriptures is fulfilled. So I think it's a worthwhile Easter question. Are we fulfilling that? I think many times, yes. We just saw an illustration of that. Are we living that? Do we feel that? Do we participate in the midst of that? How do we actually experience this enduring satisfaction in Jesus? It's pretty easy to say these things, right? I say unto you, there's enduring satisfaction in Jesus. Go in peace. How do we live this together? How do we have at least touchable satisfaction in the midst of trial? And I want to suggest to you what I want to offer in the next couple of moments is a way of life and not a simple answer. There is no like, oh, pray this prayer, take this pill, and you will have it. But I can suggest to you a way of life that touches on this very kind of satisfaction promised in the Scriptures and demonstrated in Jesus. It's a Monday morning question. What does a deeply satisfied life with central truth in a loud and distracting and at times really hard world look like? Well, step one of that is that it has to begin in a foundation. If I said, hey, there's enduring satisfaction available in Jesus, step one is to receive the gift that is being freely offered. This idea that there's satisfaction in Jesus, it doesn't work in the abstract. It doesn't work in the, you know what I'll do is I'll give it a weekend kind of a thing, right? There comes some point where each individual reaches a point in our life where we entrust our life into His. You know, it's funny when I think about enduring satisfaction. I think every human being says, I entrust my life to you, and I will know something of enduring satisfaction. But there's times in our own Christian lives where we have to say, I re-entrust my life to you. Because I'm holding on to enduring bitterness at the moment. How do I touch enduring satisfaction? In fact, I feel like I've known Christians, too, who have never really experienced any kind of touchable satisfaction, maybe have not received that, like, Lord, I take this gift that there's some fundamental satisfaction available. Receive the gift that is being freely offered. And then there's this kind of way of life, a three-part way of life. When I think about how do we enjoy this enduring satisfaction, I often think of our heart, our head, and our hand. These are probably words that you've heard before. To enjoy enduring satisfaction must include all of these. If you separate any one of them, let's just say you're all about social justice. You're all, maybe it's all hand. And I would say that it's wonderful when that's heart, head, and hand. But if it's just I do these things, then that just becomes a project, right? Or if it's all cerebral, or if it's all just how I feel, like all of these things must unite together. This is the work of enjoying, enduring satisfaction. That from that base, the next thing we have to do is just consistently and calmly and prayerfully align our reality under the truth. Now, there's reality screaming all kinds of things at us all other times, but there is this work of saying, here's what's true. Look, this could be, I won't ask Christians to raise their hand, but if you're a Christian in the room, I bet there's been times in your life where you have felt, thought, and been on a different track, and you've had to say to yourself, nope, here's what's true. I feel like a bag of dirt. I feel like life is useless, or I'm going nowhere, or I'm unrecoverable, and you have to stop that in its track. That is not what is true. This is not true, so you pull reality back into alignment with what is true. To know satisfaction is to discipline ourselves in what is true. Now, I want to make something clear. That is not convincing ourselves something is true. That's a rather unpleasant work. We're not convincing ourselves that something is true. We're just bringing it back into alignment with what is true, which is often the work of repentance, rehearsal, remembering. We're a people prone to misalignment. I love this Hebrew word shalom that you may be familiar with. Shalom means peace. Do you know that it means literally peace through alignment? When our heart, our head, our hand, our pocketbook, our relationship with our neighbors, when these things align, that's peace. In fact, there's a special kind of suffering in the world that maybe you know. That is to know what's true and to not align your world around it. That's a real special kind of misery. It's better to just like cast it all off, dive in all the way, but somewhere in the middle, like, I think this is true, but I want nothing to really do with it in my practical life. That creates a special kind of suffering. Enduring satisfaction is found in bringing these two things under alignment with each other. It also includes that being spirit, Holy Spirit, our spirit, spiritually aware, that we acknowledge, we submit to the truth and settle complex emotions. We Western folks are pretty cerebral. We are cut from the cloth of Aristotle. And so we think what's true is what we know often. Christians do a lot of cerebral Christianity. And sometimes when we're suffering, we'll just say, well, I just have to only remind myself of what's true, and then everything will be better. We have to remind ourselves what's true, and then we have to deal with those complex emotions. We can't stuff the emotions away on some kind of halfway journey to satisfaction. All the messy, complicated ways that we feel, those need to be surfaced. Instead of repressed and shut down, they need to be invited to the table and figure out where they're coming from. Some of the bent desires that we have that most bring about unwanted behavior in our life really just need to find their deepest and true satisfaction in Jesus. The answer often to boredom isn't some of the things, but deep, lasting satisfaction in Jesus. That means we have to take those emotions. This can be uncomfortable work, friends. This is sometimes sitting still with a scream raging in your head. Holy Spirit lets you and I talk about the way I feel. Talk, surface, understand, head, heart, and finally hand. To understand or to experience the deep satisfaction of Jesus, we have to live out and experience the deep satisfaction of Jesus. In other words, let me say it this way. We actually have to try it. You have to try this out, like, I trust you, and I'm going to try out living life with my emotions and the truth aligned under this reality. I was thinking about it this way. Tim and I were just talking about backcountry skiing and somebody getting rescued in backcountry skiing recently. And I was thinking it would be odd to be a long-term fan and advocate of backcountry skiing and having never tried it yourself. Like a huge fan. Love backcountry skiing. You ever done it? Nope. Read all the books, haven't done it. Huge, never having tried it, never taking the risk, never learned the skills, never helped another, never really done backcountry skiing. If you had the ability to do it and you were a backcountry skier in your head alone, that would obviously be sad. So too in the Christian life. It's something that has to be lived. In fact, I just invite you to take one more second as we end to think about this. Think about some moment or situation in your life that could look different if you had taken what you know and what you feel and you had lived it differently. With your spouse, with your coworker, with your kids, with your roommates, with your friends. How could that have looked differently instead of bitterness and silence or shutting down or getting in an argument? How could you have taken what you known and what you feel and lived it? The scripture has this great invitation in Psalm 34. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. In other words, come discover for yourself by trying that enduring, satisfactory life is available in Jesus. But I just wanted to say on this Easter morning, I've tried both. I have tried life through consumption and entertainment. I have tried life in the middle. I've tried life pointed at death, and I've tried life pointed at Jesus. And I'm just going to tell you, I stake my life on this truth. I invite you to try deeply satisfactory life with Jesus. He is living water for a dry and thirsty land. It's true. It's true on this Easter morning. It's true, and it is available. In a moment, our worship team is going to be, I think Carlo's making his way back up. But I want to say as he does that we've been really delighted to have you with us on this Easter morning. I know that these are busy times with busy plans, but I just wanted to extend to you that maybe you've come here on your own, maybe you've come by family tradition, maybe you don't have a home at Hillcrest. Well, I'd invite you to come again sometime. Tim talked about some of the opportunities that are coming up. We'd like to be the kind of community where you can come. We're in the middle of a Luke series. This is a great time to ask questions about who this Jesus person is. So you might come and find life here together. We rehearse Easter, Resurrection Sunday realities year after year after year so that we keep our lives mentally, emotionally, and practically aligned to the truth. It is the good and right and helpful thing to do that we might know what is true. And so I just say to you, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, whatever your plans are for the rest of this day, this week, this year, your life, you may go out, we go out sent today under the banner of this truth. He is risen. He is risen indeed.
Thanks for listening. For more info, visit hcbellingham.com and join us any Sunday, 9 and 11 a.m.